The mere fact that you were an Easterner in those days labeled you fit only for one thing: death, and death at the hands of the Nigerian authorities. The Igbos and their associates were killed in practically every village in northern Nigeria. They were killed in many places in western Nigeria. They were in Lagos, even on Kata Bridge, the very center of Lagos. People were looked at and thought, oh, this looks an Igbo, and killed. The very first army officer killed in Lagos, actually, during that time was from Calabar, was killed on the bridge, and so on. Igbos were being hunted out and killed. The Igbos that remained in Lagos after the war began were herded together and detained without any trial or anything, no question of any legal rights. Till today, property of Igbos are still sequestered in various areas of Nigeria.
Hello, beautiful people. Please, I am begging for your indulgence, just a bit of your time actually to watch this video that I'm about to show to you now. Well, before that, I want you to have trust on this page. There is no way a lot of people has accused us about propagating hate and stuff like that. But then what we are doing is to show you historical facts about the question that we are asking now has been asked several years ago. So, and it is important. And that is why, or that was why history was removed from our curriculum, so that we don't think, so that we can rise up and reason properly. But social media, thank God, has really brought us to that point that we can show historical documents, facts, and everything about who we are. And that is what we are doing with this channel, Namen TV. Just do us a favor, share this page, share this video, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Namen TV. Thank you.
January 15, 1966 coup. Who carried out the coup, and for what reasons?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to try and enlighten people on this coup that seems to be at the center of subsequent problems in Nigeria. The coup of January 15th, 1966 was actually led by Major Ifajuna, and he commanded the activities in the south, and Zogo, another major, coordinated the northern side of it from Kaduna. The reason for the coup, if you remember, Nigeria became independent in 1960. We had a government, a quasi-Westminster type government with a parliament and a ceremonial president, reflecting, as it were, the Queen of Great Britain. That was Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Tafawa Balewa was the president from the north. Now, the real problem with Nigeria has always been the imbalance of the federation that is and was known as Nigeria. I remember when I was at school, I was taught that the great thing about a federation was that no federating unit should ever be preponderant over the others. As it happened, the Nigerian Federation, when it was created, was given down to Nigerians from London. And that federation contained the imbalance of the North being preponderant, in fact, over the two other sides, the West and the East. And this created, right from the first day a certain degree of friction. The North could dictate and the South, whichever part of the South, could just complain if it's not in accord with what the North wished. The first few years of independence were not too bad, but there were a lot of unfulfilled ambitions of the Nigerians, because in those days we thought that once you got independence, you were free and everything worked, and you joined the higher league of nations internationally discussing what went on. In fact, to Nigerians it looked as though, and indeed they tended to show, that independence in itself was the achievement. Now Nigeria was free, us were a member of the world. Instead of looking upon it as the beginning of our journey to nationhood. And I say this, and I want to underscore it. Nigeria was not, has never been a nation. We had the aspiration, hopes that Nigeria one day would become a nation. And that has been elusive up till today. The reason being that, most unfortunately, the powers in Nigeria were concentrated in the hands of the North, which was preponderant, and wrongly so. At independence, we hoped we would be able, in fact, the three leaders of the country had different notions of independence. There was the actual leader of the struggle for independence, Dr. Ndi Igbo, who rightly thought that independence now created, as it were, a beginning, but that we were already a nation and we were now finding our positions in his own philosophical, political beliefs in Pan-Africanism. So we just had to move into the broad continental alliance. The North, under the Sardauna of Sokoto, whose agent was the Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, felt that the Nigerian nation one had to tread very slowly, because he saw and they saw a great deal of inequities in Nigeria, and perhaps the most important then was the level of education between the North and the South. And therefore that affected, of course, the position of the North, or Northerners, in the bureaucracy of Nigeria. The Sardauna and the people of the North got down to trying to build up the North, taking everything they could from the Federation to build up the North to a position in their minds of equality between themselves intellectually and the rest of Nigeria. The West, under Chief Obafemi Awolowo, thought likewise and took the position of consolidating the West so as to ensure that at a given time the West would then emerge superior to either the North or the East. Again, let me go back to the problem of the East. The East entered independence having accepted that the nation was already there. Naturally, the concept of nationhood implied a great deal of sacrifice by the East at all points. First sacrifice, the non-emergence of Dr. Azikiwe as the first executive leader of Nigeria. He vacated the place. He made the sacrifice so that the North could be accommodated. Second, very simple. During the constitutional conferences, independence was offered Nigeria before 1960. But to be able to accommodate the North, that Dr. Azikiwe believed was already part of a nation, we got this rather odd situation where a nationalist refused independence to wait for the North, and so on. Yet, your question, sir, was the question of the reason for the coup. So let me go into it. The teething problems of Nigeria after 1960, the independence, manifested itself in a number of ways. There was a friction over the preponderance of the North. There was certain difficulties about religious beliefs in the country. There was corruption, bad administration, and so on. But the real problem came from the West, which by 1966 was really in turmoil. And the reason was quite a simple one. Where does a leader lead from? In the North, the Sadana led from Kaduna in the North. His agent was in the South, Prime Minister. Awolowo for the West believed his position was better and he would be have greater effect on Nigeria if he ruled from the Federation. So he looked towards Lagos. And his deputy, Akintola, he was quite prepared to leave the West too. What a funny thing happened during the election. A funny thing happened. Dr. Azikiwe, who also opted for the Federation, won the election in the West. And it now looked as though an Igbo man was ruling in the East, ruling in the Midwest, and about to rule in the West. And this was not acceptable to the West. We started our problems there, because overnight the victory of the NCNC in the West was nullified by a number of Yorubas crossing from the government to the opposition side and creating a new government. And this actually is at the foundation of the distrust between the Igbos still now and the Yorubas. Now, law and order broke down in the West after the second election. There was so much rigging. In fact, BBC had this rather wonderful statement. It said that men became pregnant overnight with votes. Because, you know, we wear these huge robes, and you can stuff as many ballot papers inside them. And as a result of that, and because by then Awolowo was in jail for treasonable felony, it was felt that the North used its powers to ensure that Akintola, who became their stooge, won the election. It became very dangerous to travel around the streets of Lagos or the West, anywhere. That's when they started throwing acid at people in the streets, in your car, the phenomenon known as wet year. That is wet in wet year. Throwing acid on people. And it was to halt this, actually, that the military was pulled out of barracks to help stabilize the situation. And this went on. We were not moving anywhere. The countries were becoming independent. We were seeing Julius Nyerere creating personality in Africa, Nkrumah there, and so on. Nigeria is big, and with all the promise of independence, was clearly doing nothing. It was then that a group of young officers. Now let's get it straight. The young officers had within Igbos, Yorubas, and Hausas. The way the Nigerian army was structured, you could not escape a preponderance of Igbo officers. And these were at the middle level because they were essentially majors. By then I was a lieutenant colonel, so I wasn't part of it. I was then commanding a battalion in Kano. The coup ostensibly, because I've later found out that the whole aim of the coup was to halt this apparent drift in Nigeria. But significantly, you know what they wanted to do? To create a presidential commission of army officers as a safeguard, the people who would guard the nation, and hand over government to Chief Obafemi Awolowo. The idea was to release him from prison, make him prime minister, and in the hope that Nigeria would become a better place.